So now there's an interesting report in Politico that talked to Clinton donors, and one of their major worries is the fact that they think that Bernie Sanders is going to outraise Hillary Clinton in this upcoming quarter. Now, of course, we know money in politics, kind of important. It's kind of important to raise money for political campaigns. And Bernie Sanders, well, recently he had his announcement on Saturday that he had reached 2 million individual donors. And all of those donors give about under $30. Now, this is very, very significant. And I said before, this is going to have the Hillary Clinton campaign kind of worried. Well, why? Well, as Politico points out with some of the interviews with these donors, it's kind of a big deal because their well of rich donors is starting to run dry. So let's get to some of the details. Now, as I said, this article says that Hillary Clinton's donors say they think Bernie Sanders will raise more money in the fourth quarter than their candidate for the first time ever. That's very, very significant. Bernie Sanders is running a complete grassroots campaign. Doesn't have those big donors. Doesn't have that super PAC. So, he doesn't have the Washington insiders. What he has is the people. And the people continue to speak more loudly than the establishment. That's what I love. Now, what's interesting is they point out that the Clinton campaign officials say that she remains on track to reach her goal of $100 million for the primary by the end of the year. Now, she's already collected about $77 million. However, Sanders, in the last quarter of the campaign, raised about $26 million, almost matching Hillary Clinton's haul of $28 million. Now, when it comes to a campaign and campaign fundraising, Bernie Sanders has proven not only to be competitive, be a juggernaut on his own right. So that's really interesting. Multiple sources on Clinton's campaign team told Politico that they expect the Vermont senator to beat her when the next financial disclosures are filed January 30th, and that's just right before the Iowa caucuses, by the way. Now, of course, these donors are saying, well, there's a reason. Well, what reason do they give Politico? Quote, people are feeling very complacent. Complacent? Oh, and more reluctant to contribute. Why? Well, it's because they say that people don't take Bernie Sanders that seriously. And this is according to a top Clinton donor named Alan Patrikoff. They look at the other side and think, how could anyone possibly back any one of them? The attitude of sensible people is that she's the only one who makes any sense. Already, this guy, Alan, is filled with just that condescension that you find in elite Washington circles. This is the establishment talking, of course. So it's going to be dripping with that sort of, oh my God, I can't believe this Bernie Sanders. No, Hillary Clinton's the only one that makes sense. Now, what they're actually right about is that Trump and Cruz, the two leading contenders on the Republican side, have no chance in fucking hell of ever getting elected. Now, you can say, Jeff, you don't know that. You don't know that. When half of America says we'd be embarrassed if Donald Trump got the presidency, that says something. Besides, Trump, his support base is actually very low, very vocal, but very small. So keep that in mind. And besides, if the election were held today, and there are a lot of polls that back this, most recently the one in Quinnipiac that I covered yesterday, it showed that Donald Trump would get beaten by Bernie Sanders by 13 points, almost 14 points, while Hillary Clinton beats him by 7. So once again, yeah. Now, this guy, this donor, thinks that, well, the idea that Ted Cruz or Donald Trump could become president, well, that'd be a huge fundraiser. So they're thinking, well, we're going to think about the general and not the primary. So that's why all of these donors are holding back. At least that's according to them. None of the donors or campaign insiders Politico spoke to on Monday disputed the notion that Sanders was on track to beat them in the end-of-the-year cash race, but nonetheless, they have a concern. Quote, over the past few days, Clinton advisors have taken steps to stoke donor enthusiasm. For example, Bill and Chelsea Clinton, who on Monday announced that she is pregnant with their second child, have stepped up their fundraising for the campaign. They are expected to become even more involved in the campaign beginning in January. And Politico, many of the donors Politico has interviewed over the last few months, say the widespread perception that she's a shoo-in is prompting would-be donors to remain on the sidelines, waiting to throw their financial support behind her for the only race they believe truly matters, the general election. An anonymous top donor says this, quote, let Bernie outraise her. He's not going to be the nominee. Once again, you look at that from the money people in Washington saying, no, there is no race. This is a coronation. We've already given all this money to Hillary Clinton. We've already figured that she's going to be, we've already picked her. The establishment has already spoken. They want Hillary Clinton. And you see this reflected in their remarks. It's very, very snide and condescending. And as I had mentioned, that same anonymous donor said the idea that Donald Trump or Ted Cruz could be president is the greatest fundraising mechanism in the history of the world, and it's too early for that. Now they go into to talk about and to give an example of how eager these top donors are to be to give to Hillary Clinton during the general campaign. Quote, a sign that Clinton's donors are more eager to donate to a general election than a primary they see is already in the bag was the success of the High Dollar Victory Fund event last week. There, donors wrote $32,400 checks that are split between the National and State Democratic Party. However, as Politico notes, the surge has less to do with a Clinton swoon. She's raising cash at a respectable clip than the Vermont senator's wildfire appeal to small money donors, which reminds many Clinton veterans of Barack Obama's surprising fundraising prowess during the 2008 campaign. Now, it also goes in to talk about the large number of small contributors. I had already mentioned that. So, I mean, think about this. He has outpaced and broke President Barack Obama's record. That's impressive. That's no small feat. And he's almost raised as much as Hillary Clinton and is set to outraise her. And yet here's the establishment saying, oh, don't worry about that. We're going to sit on the sidelines until she wins our coronation, and then we're going to throw in a bunch of money. But we don't have to worry about this guy. We don't have to worry about this Sanders guy. Nor do we have to worry about the 2.2 million people that donated to the Sanders campaign. They don't matter. No. We already know the outcome of this because that's what we picked. That's the establishment for you. Now, one important thing to mention is a weakness of Hillary Clinton. Quote, while Sanders has been building up a grassroots list of small donors who can be tapped and tapped again for donations throughout the campaign, Clinton's team targeted its list of core supporters early and had many donors write the maximum checks of $2,700 months ago. And I love this top donor for the Clinton campaign. Listen to this quote, guys. Those of us who snap to attention when she snaps her fingers, they tapped into that long time ago. So Hillary goes, I need money. Come give me money, rich people. And they come to attention. Yes, Miss Clinton. Yes, Mrs. Clinton. We'll give you all this money. You know why? Because, well, money's going to buy access. And that's why people give to a campaign. I'm not talking about you and me. This is what top donors, political insiders do. That's why they're insiders in the first place. Because they're inside the establishment. They're part of the machine. They're part of the status quo. And what Bernie Sanders represents is the destruction of the status quo. A replacement of the status quo with something new. But these guys, these top donors, well, they don't want something new. Why? Because they're benefiting greatly from the system as is. And of course, this worries them. Well, we've already tapped out our donors. our large donors, so now we got to get some more. And what the campaign is doing to get more is, for one, they're trying a couple of strategies here. What they're trying to do is dispatching high-profile surrogates, like former campaign manager for Obama, David Plouffe, or former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, political consultant James Carville, and former Clinton aide Lisa Caputo. Now, they're getting these surrogates to come out and host something called salons. Now, what are salons? They're free events where these insiders, these surrogates, talk about the campaign and take questions from attendees, all in the hopes that they could find more donors, more small-time donors, more large donors, because once again, they've tapped out their large donor base. They've already given the maximum, whereas when it comes to Bernie Sanders has the numbers of people who haven't given the maximum and are looking to give more as the campaign progresses. That's a huge advantage on the part of Sanders. Now, this is why you see a lot of politicians wanting to push back against that limit. Why? Because they don't have the support of the people. They only have the support of large, wealthier donors who already give the maximum and can't give any more. Now, of course, this doesn't even include any of the super PAC stuff. I haven't even got to that yet. Now, the article says this, quote, "This was a part of a series of events which surrogates meant to encourage new raisers and donors to get involved in the campaign and grow our network." And that's what a campaign official said of the free events, as quoted in the article. Now, even if Clinton manages to make up the lost ground between now and year's end, Sanders' success with grassroots donors and Clinton's dependence on the big money contributors her opponent decries as out-of-touch plutocrats creates a PR problem with her campaign. Well, exactly. Remember, this is the year of the outsider candidate. And also, when you ask the American people, in poll after poll, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all of us agree that super PACs are a terrible idea, that Citizens United was a terrible decision. Allowing money in politics to such a degree is a terrible idea. And all of this money that will go to super PACs and large wealthier donors, since they're already tapped out for her normal campaign, will now be giving to her super PACs. That is a PR nightmare, especially in this election. I mean, think about it this way. If you have Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, now a lot of you are like, oh, come on, she'd wipe the floor with Donald Trump. That might be true. And look, current polls show that. But think about it this way. If he could somehow appeal to that, and I don't want to give the Trump campaign any tips here. I'm just saying that if you point out her dependence on large money, whereas he doesn't, remember, he doesn't have a super PAC. He actually does get a lot of small donations as well as self-finances. You don't need the money, guys. And that's why the establishment hates Trump. It's because they can't control him with the money. When, of course, certainly the policies that Trump espouses would certainly help the establishment and would help the system. He doesn't have any plans to dismantle that system. Bernie Sanders does. And Hillary Clinton also does not have any plans to dismantle that system. PR nightmare. Absolutely right. It's absolutely right. Now remember during the debate, and this is sort of my last point on this story, she had said, quote, "About 3% of my donations come from people in the finance and investment world." Remember, she was getting hit over the head essentially with their ties to Wall Street. In my opinion, you don't, as a wealthy donor, you don't just give money because you believe, because you're ready for Hillary, that you want to break the glass ceiling. No. If you're an insider, you pay for that political access to keep your insider status. You give money to a campaign so that you can have access later. And you can have influence. And say all the money that Hillary Clinton gets from all of these different large donors doesn't try to influence her in one direction or another, you're naive. Absolutely naive. It is all about influence and access. Now, she had said, once again, 3% of her donations come from finance and investment. Well, that's actually wrong. Her campaign and her super PAC has received $5.7 million from the securities and investment industry. That's out of $97.8 million total. Now, that's about 6%. So it's misleading, to say the least. And not to mention, most of her money, sure, she might have a lot of smaller donors, and she can sure tout that. But when it comes to the money, how much money she receives, it's definitely a lot more. It makes up a lot more of her campaign. Think about the money that we actually can't account for. And that's, of course, the super PAC money, the 501c4s. You put all that in perspective, and you put all that into context, that does create a huge problem. So while Bernie Sanders continues to get lots of money and might even outraise her, Hillary Clinton's facing a problem with large donors no longer being able to be tapped for money, and a huge PR problem. And if you don't think that will play a very important role in this primary, you might be mistaken.